News 24 únicamente en I-24 News.
Моя толстая. Да, так у нее были ровненькие,
Hello, welcome. Thanks for joining us. You're watching I-24 News. We're coming to you live from Tel Aviv. The top stories this hour. A senior Hezbollah commander killed in an Israeli airstrike on the south of Lebanon. Iran will not get off scot-free after Saturday's drone and missile attack. The IDF spokesman says Israel will respond in its own time. And days after helping defend Israel against Iran, Jordanian officials urged the world to put the focus back on Gaza. First, though, some developments on Israel's northern front, where the IDF is battling the Iranian proxy Hezbollah. A Hezbollah brigade commander has been killed in an airstrike near the Lebanese city of Tyre. For more on that, let's go to the north of Israel. Our Pia Steckelbach joins us. Pia, this was Ismail Youssef Baz. That's who he's been named as. Who was he? And is this a sign of Israel's response to Iran might go via Lebanon?
Right, Laura, Hezbollah commander, senior Hezbollah commander, as the Israeli military confirmed, Ismail Youssef Baz was responsible for, as the Israeli army says, for launching and planning rocket attacks and attacks with anti-tank missiles towards northern Israel. He was killed in an apparent drone strike in an area close to the Lebanese city of Tyre. It is located in the western coast of Lebanon, in the southern area still. He was traveling in a vehicle. He was killed, and there are also reports that several others were injured in that strike. It is not the first time, Laura, that the Israeli army conducts operations in that area, in the Tyre area. About a month ago, a senior Hamas member of Hamas's military wing was assassinated in a drone strike as well, exactly in that area. And we're just getting reports about another strike in the southern area of Lebanon, the Shahabia area. That is allegedly another Israeli strike that might have killed further Hezbollah personnel. However, there's no confirmation, nor by the Israeli army or by Hezbollah on that. Hezbollah did confirm that the commander, Ismail Youssef Baz, was killed. He was killed on the way to Jerusalem. This is what the Hezbollah statement says, which is basically a phrase that says, or that Hezbollah is using for victims of Israeli attacks, basically. This comes after a quite eventful day on the Israel-Lebanon border. This morning, 3 people were lightly injured in Bet Hillel after 2 UAVs that were launched by Hezbollah from southern Lebanon exploded without giving a warning by the Israeli air defense system. And the Israeli army says it is investigating why no incoming rocket alert was triggered in that area before.
Pia, thank you very much. Pia Steckelbach there in the north of Israel. Well, Israel's war cabinet is meeting for a third time to discuss how to respond to Iran 3 nights after that unprecedented drone and missile attack. Today, Iran's deputy foreign minister said his country would respond to any Israeli attack within seconds. This recap with our Ariel Levin-Waldman now.
Israel has vowed a response to Iran's massive air assault on the Jewish state. 350 ballistic missiles and drones were launched on Saturday night. 99% were shot down.
We are closely assessing the situation. We remain at our highest level of readiness. Iran will face the consequences for its actions. We will choose our response accordingly.
The question now is, how will Israel respond and when? The scope of the threat was unprecedented. Iran launched enough firepower to level a city. That it was stopped with only superficial damage has afforded Israel some leeway in its response.
Either in Iran or outside Iran. Inside Iran, strategic targets like military bases, air bases, nuclear facilities. These are some of the components, maybe also some symbols, state symbols of Iran, which would mean definitely hitting at the mullahs, and this could be also a choice.
Israel has signaled it will hit Iran in a way that hurts without provoking an all-out war. NBC reports and cites U.S. officials that the U.S. believes Israel will limit the attack to Iranian proxies in the region, likely IRGC affiliates in Syria. But a response that's too limited risks giving Iran a sense of impunity and setting a precedent for such large-scale air assaults. And that means the possibility of a strike on Iran's nuclear program that has the UN worried.
We are always concerned about this possibility. What I can tell you is that our inspectors in Iran were informed by the Iranian government that on the yesterday all the nuclear facilities that we are inspecting every day would remain closed on security considerations.
Unlikely targets include Iran's soft underbelly, its oil and gas infrastructure. The United States would heavily oppose any actions that would spike oil prices during an election year. In any strike option, the enemy also gets a say, and the whole Middle East now hangs on the precipice of total war.
And in the last hour, the Israeli Defense Minister has been visiting the troops in northern Israel. He says that Iran's attack failed and will fail to deter Israel. Let me introduce my guest this hour. Avi Pazner is the former Israeli ambassador to France and Italy. Good evening, Ambassador.
Good evening, Laura.
We're also joined by Brigadier General Hanan Geffen, former commander of the 8200 Intelligence Unit in the IDF. Thank you for being with us as well, Brigadier General. So, Avi, I'll start with you. I mean, clearly the Israeli cabinet is divided. There are reports that it's divided over how to respond to Iran. They keep having these meetings night after night. The US and Israel's other allies have made it clear they don't want Israel to respond. Would it be wise for Israel to squander all the goodwill it has right now?
Yes, but Laura, I believe that Israel will have to respond. I mean, even if you are the less hawkish possible minister, there cannot be a situation that Iran is launching 350 missile, rocket, cruise missiles at us and that we don't respond. The question is how to respond in such a manner that we are not drawn into a general conflict with Iran. That it is enough, it causes enough outrage in Iran without dragging Iran into a war with Israel. Meaning we have to respond with our head and not with our guts. And this is why, by the way, the cabinet, the war cabinet, is meeting already 3 days in a row. Every day they are meeting and studying. It's a very delicate balance. And also we do not want to lose the support of the US, of those European countries who participated with us in destroying the missiles that were launched from Iran. So it is a very delicate question, but I say again, Israel cannot afford itself to be victim of that kind of aggression by Iran without responding, because if you do not respond, then every time Iran is discontent with something, let's say we enter Rafah, let's say, they don't like it, they shoot 100 missiles at us. We have to respond in order to get Iran's attention to the fact that we will not tolerate direct attack on us.
Oh, okay. Hanan Geffen, do you agree with that? How can Israel get the balance right when it comes to responding to Iran?
First of all, we are in the Middle East, and we have to speak the language of the Middle East. And the language of the Middle East is, if you won't respond, you're actually saying you have the white flag. That's it. It means this is the way it will translate it. So there is no question about it. Avi Pazner said, right, hawkish or not hawkish, all of them are for it. And the question is how to respond in a way that will serve Israel as you mentioned, not to disturb this new order, and gain all the target that we want. And the targets are very complicated. That's why the cabinet is convening day after day. The military, in the meantime, is going back to the office and trying to the drawing table.
Do you think there is a split, a divide in the cabinet?
No, there's not a question of split. I would say the question is the right target, and the right targets can be many of them, and I would say there are different fields of targets. First of all is, of course, the military targets, because the aim was Israeli military target, so we have to respond with the same token to the reply will be in the same token, military targets. But there is also one. Why did the Iranians started to disturb the equation that persisted for many years and across all the time of this 6 months? And it lies in something that is internal in Iran. They have suffered a loss of five members.
IRGC members?
IRGC members, prominent in Syria, and a vital link in the connection between Iran and Hezbollah. Israel targeted, they were looking for them. This is not the first time Israel targeted a prominent IRGC figure. But this time, the Iranian, it was shown in the street. The funerals were attended by the high-ranking the ministers, presidents, and all the military guys. And the public in Iran was observing it. Now, the question that was at the table of the Iranian minister was how to respond. And there were questions there. There was the extremists, probably the RGC and the military, were going for a very harsh answer, the kind that was actually executed. But on the first iteration, it was stopped because there was an announcement a week earlier stopping all the air traffic in Tehran, and it was withdrawn after half an hour with a very embarrassing way. It means that there was a decision, it was stopped, and then again. So
you see some confusion in their own decision making.
And the Israeli intelligence is trying to see how the decision making in Iran is trying to target the decision making, trying to target those who were pushing for the hard line, trying to find the right targets to convince them.
Okay, well, what about the argument then that Iran wanted this attack to fail, that it knew it would get shot down, that it knew it wouldn't get any missiles through, it wouldn't do any significant damage, it could save face and step back? What about Iran's motivation, and does that matter when it comes to thinking about retaliation?
Look, Laura, I do not think that the Iranian wanted 99% of the missiles and drones being shot down. I think this is a terrible disaster from a tactical point of view for Iran, that they fired 300 missiles and rockets and drones towards Israel, and 99% were destroyed. Not only by Israeli, that's true, also Americans, British, foreign sources say Jordanian also. I don't think that Iran wanted that kind of result. It's true, maybe they did not want to hit civilian targets. Okay, that is true. They did not want to kill Israeli civilians. That's true. But they wanted to hit Israeli military targets. They hit some very lightly, but they wanted to hit Israeli military targets and to succeed, not to be ashamed before all the world.
Okay, all right. Well, we should point out, of course, that one young girl, a Bedouin girl, was injured and is fighting for her life in hospital.
Yes.
Of course, the attack failed because of the actions of Israel and its allies, and the Kingdom of Jordan took part in the US-led alliance that shot down the Iranian missiles on Sunday, and that has put the staunch US ally in Tehran's crosshairs. Today, Jordan's foreign minister, Iman Safadi, told US media that Israel must not be allowed to use the war with Iran to distract what's happening in Gaza, where the IDF is fighting Hamas. Well, joining us now, Dr. Zack A is a writer and political commentator. Thank you for joining us, Nasir. So can these comments from Foreign Minister Safadi be seen as some kind of damage control attempt after Jordan did robustly step in to help defend Israel on Saturday night?
Very much so. The Jordanian king has been walking a tightrope, and the latest actions by the Jordanian Air Force has revealed to the Jordanians what they have suspected all along, and that the king has maintained close ties and relationship with the Israeli military. And this is embarrassing for a king who's, of course, ruling as a dictator. There is no political representation in Jordan. The majority of Jordanians reject his policies. They want the embassy, the Israeli embassy, to be shut down, and they want to dismiss the Israeli ambassador. They don't want that peace agreement with Israel. They don't want any relationship with Israel. On the other hand, the king and his military and security elite are running foreign policy in footstep with the United States strategic vision for the region. And he's really walking a tightrope and taking a huge political gamble, basically governing against the will of his own people. And that's why we are seeing his foreign minister saying, we don't want anybody to interfere with Jordan's airspace. On the other hand, the U.S. is operating against Iran from Jordanian soil, and that doesn't seem to bother the foreign minister. So a very tightrope. And if the escalation in the region continues, the king will probably have to make tough choices when it comes to his relationship with Israel.
And on top of that, Nazir, of course, Jordan is dealing with a pretty direct threat from Iran, a threat that came via some of the semi-state news agencies saying that Jordan would be targeted if it did step in once again to protect Israel. How worried do you think they are in Jordan about that threat from Tehran?
Well, they are worried, but the king has always placed himself openly and practically with the American moves in the region. Unlike some of the Gulf allies who are a little more careful, they did not allow the U.S. to operate against Iran from their airspace. The king of Jordan is openly coordinating with the U.S. and Israel. However, you wouldn't hear this in the Jordanian media. In the Jordanian media, the king himself comes out and condemns Israel and its actions. So the hypocrisy has not escaped the Jordanians. They can see that. And probably the king feels that the Iranian threat is because the many Jordanians actually accept and embrace the Iranian and Hamas vision vis-a-vis Israel, and that is why the king is really ruling over a nation that disagrees with his policies vis-a-vis Israel.
And just to provide some context, Jordan has had its own problems with Iran via its border with Syria, which is partly under the control of Iran.
Exactly. I mean, there is no doubt that Iran has its sights on Jordan. They understand this division between the king and the people, who, by the way, as you know, are predominantly Palestinians, probably 55 to 60%. However, the king understands that the Muslim Brotherhood in Jordan and Iran are now in alliance, and they want to create, an unstable situation for the king. So he has made his choice. He is with America and Israel. However, politically, in the long run, that is really harmful to a king who talks about democracy and reform. And all of this, of course, flies in the face of his actions that run counter to his own people.
Nazir, thank you very much. Dr. Nazir AlBarin there. Well, the role of Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates on Saturday night is a little more opaque. The two countries have reportedly denied opening their airspace to the US and Israel, although they were involved in intelligence behind the scenes. Well, for more on that, we're joined from Bahrain by Abdullah AlBarin, Bahraini columnist and geopolitical analyst. Always a pleasure to see you, Abdullah. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure, Laura.
It's been described, Abdullah, as the first real test of the Middle East alliance, but it seems as though the UAE and Saudi Arabia are not quite ready to publicly own their role in what happened on Saturday night. Is that fair?
What is fair and what is not fair? I mean, at the present time, if Iran decided to immerse this region again into a crisis, would we sit idle and accept that? Of course, nobody will sit idle. Are we going to be doing the interpretation of that position in any way to be, read into being in support of Israel or otherwise? No. If, and I say if, the Saudis, the Jordanian, or anybody else in this, effort to minimize the cost of this barbaric attack by the Iranian, definitely, if it's going to save the region from further deterioration, I think it's only acceptable and it is demandable by all parties to play their part.
Abdullah, could this be a kind of a glimpse into what the future could look like in an ideal world? An opportunity for the Middle East to take responsibility for its own defence and be less dependent on the United States?
I believe this is a lesson that Israel could draw from, not the region. We've been telling the Israelis, or the whole region was telling the Israelis, a better and more important scope for regional cooperation if we solve all outstanding issues, including the Israeli-Palestinian issue. But that will minimize the impact in policies that's effective. Now, have Israel benefited from this lesson? I hope it does. More than that, we have news with Israel's part of it. Now, whatever the lesson drawn from last week in attack on Israel should be acted on by everybody in the region.
Abdullah, having a tiny bit of a problem with the sound, but thank you. Stay with us, Abdullah. Avi Pazner, you were listening to that. I mean, could this be an opportunity to build on the remarkable cooperation we saw on Saturday night?
No, absolutely. I believe so. And I think the moderate Sunni countries are extremely worried and disturbed by the Iranian action because, may I remind that Saudi Arabia was already attacked by Iran 4 or 5 years ago, I believe, and they put their petrol installation on fire. I think that United Emirates have been attacked by the Houthis on orders of Iran. Of course, this is a great opportunity for Israel to try to build a coalition of moderate countries against Iran. And this is why also it is so important that our reaction, and I hope there will be a reaction against Iran, does not destroy the chances to build such a coalition, because it is important for the future. But now we have seen what Iran is capable of doing, and it can do it against Israel, it can do it against Saudi Arabia, against Jordan, which is directly threatened. And I am not surprised that the king stands by the policy of his father, King Hussein, which was a policy which favors the American and Israel, because the Hashemite regime is built on the fact that it is under threat from outside Shiites and other forces, and that the Israel is the ultimate guarantee of its survival. So I'm not at all surprised of their policy.
Hanan Geffen, do you see some positivity there, some hope that this could be the basis of a future defence architecture that the US has been trying to push for many years now? We actually saw it in practice on Saturday night. We saw what could be.
I say, starting from the 4 or 5 hours of Saturday night, I don't imagine a film director, the best of the world, can create such a movie, a slow motion, that within 4 hours changed the perception of so many people in the West and in the countries around us. Suddenly, all of them understand that the threat of Iran that was at the basis of this cooperation is a real one. It's more. It has the nuclear problem. and the revolutionary spirit that they are trying to send over the area, spread over the area in the Shiite in Saudi Arabia, in Bahrain, and the Houthis in Yemen, creating instability in the Middle East. These 3 or 4 hours demonstrated in a way that I believe will be the basis for extending this coalition and relationship.
All right, thank you. Abdullah, I'm not sure if you're still with us. Abdullah Al-Junaid.
I am.
Oh, wonderful. Abdullah, I'll give the last word to you. Sorry, we had a technical problem.
Okay. I mean, for me, I've heard what Avi have said, and I'm sorry to hear the same narrative being pushed. What we need is to learn from all the past experiences and lessons. I mean, Jordan is more threatened today. It's because of what took place in 2003 through the invasion of Iraq. And we all know, Avi personally know, where Israel stood from that. I mean, the current deterioration of the region, it's not because of just all of a sudden we are faced with Iran or somebody else. What we need to do is learn, have the courage enough to acknowledge those mistakes and address them strategically. Not anymore describing Jordan as the way he described it, which was not very acceptable, being a partner with Israel and so much, and did what it did, and took so much punishment for it to stand and engaging all those missiles targeting Israel.
Abdullah, should Israel respond to Iran?
Well, a wise man says sometime you'll need to give your enemy a golden bridge. Israel had a lot of ways to punish Iran without, taking this region further. Israel could and should respond, but it should be very method of response.
Abdullah, thank you very much, and apologies for the problem with the line. Abdullah Al-Junaid in Bahrain and Avi Pazner, Hanan Geffen, stay with us. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll talk a bit more about what is happening inside Iran days after that missile strike on Israel. Stay with us.
Israel is in a state of war.
Families completely gunned down in their beds. We have no idea where is she.
As our soldiers are fighting on the front line, but the general perception is something that certainly needs to be fought as well.
Esta semana en News 24, Israel bajo ataque. News 24 en español trae el análisis y la información de los acontecimientos de la guerra Espadas de Hierro.
Entrevistas exclusivas, reportes desde la zona de guerra, la reacción de los países hispanoparlantes.
News 24, el único medio en español que te mantiene informado y conectado con la comunidad latina en Israel. News 24, únicamente en I24 News.
Welcome back as the world awaits Israel's response to the Iranian drone and missile attack on Saturday night. Inside Iran, the regime is calling it a success, this despite the fact 99% of its missiles were shot down by Israel and its allies. Iran's leaders are warning that next time they won't give advance notice of any attack.
If the Israeli regime makes a mistake, this time Iran's response, as Iran's military commanders announced, will not be minimal, but immediate and severe.
Suppose the Zionist regime accepts the answer it has received as an actor who behaves rationally and continues its normal course, the Islamic Republic of Iran will take no action in that case. But if, for any reason, the Zionist regime wants to take even minor action against our land, against the Iranian people, against Iran's interests, it will definitely face a decisive and harsh response. And this answer will not take another 12 or 13 days. Zionists should not count in hours, but in seconds.
Well, for more, we're joined now by Mariam Measi. She's the founder and director of the Cyrus Forum and a senior fellow at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute. Great to see you, Mariam. Thank you very much for being with us. And just in terms of who you've been speaking to and what you know about what's happening inside Iran, what is the feeling there 3 days after that unprecedented attack?
Hi, Laura. I think it's mixed emotions. I mean, of course, there's anxiety about possible war. But also there is this underlying hope, and it's expressed a lot on social media by Iranians of all different kinds, who say that, well, first of all, that they have no enmity with the Israeli people and with the state of Israel, and that they have a common enemy with Israel, and that is the regime. The same Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps that has attacked Israel is the very same force that terrorizes the Iranian people, that tortures children in prisons because they have come out and protested, particularly in the Women Life Freedom uprising following the death of Mahsa Amini, systematically raping women, executing people without due process, and having a mafia hold on Iran's economy. So there's a feeling of anxiety, but as I said, there's also great hope, because if there is a shakeup, if there is some kind of attack or a loosening of the grip on power by the regime, then this is a people who have waited for 45 years, really, to be rid of the tyrants that are oppressing them.
Right, and I want to point out some of the videos that have been circulating on social media that kind of support what you've been saying. Some show, young Iranians graffiti on walls and stuff like that, encouraging Israel to attack the Islamic regime. And then at the same time, you've got these official organised protests, pro-regime protests, which a lot of people have pointed out do look pretty small, not very well attended. Can we read anything into that?
The pro-regime protests have for many years now been forced. People being brought in from the countryside, lured in really with free food and what have you. People from Afghanistan even brought in for when the Friday sermons are happening or the supreme leader is speaking, people being bussed in. Of course, the regime does have a layer of support in society, but every totalitarian regime is going to have that. What's most important right now, I think, for people in Israel and around the world to know is that those people who take their lives at risk really to spray paint on city walls, asking Israel to attack or expressing solidarity with the people of Israel, they really are hoping for a future that is entirely different than what this regime represents, a future that harkens back to Cyrus the Great and the friendship, the ancient bonds of friendship between the Jewish and Iranian people. As you know, the tomb of Esther and Mordecai are in Iran, and in Israel, many people of Iranian origin live. And, if the revolution of 1979 hadn't taken place, Iran, a secular, modernizing, liberalizing country, could have been a force for peace between Palestinians and Israelis and peace more broadly in the Middle East region. But the opposite has happened, and there's a regime in power that really has a foothold in every part of the region, and it is responsible for terror throughout the region, but also across the world, and it's a fundamental threat to the existence of Israel and a fundamental threat more broadly to any kind of society, any kind of people who values freedom and human dignity.
And what about the Iranian economy? Because a war with Israel wouldn't be cheap. Firing 300 missiles isn't cheap. Can Iran afford a war with Israel, especially when you've got the US and Europe today talking about increasing the very harsh sanctions already on the Islamic regime?
Well, unfortunately, this regime in the last 2-3 years by the Biden administration has been handed basically money through turning a blind eye on sanctions. So because of the great amount of oil wealth that in the last couple of years the regime has managed to secure for itself, it has been able to do this. And that's why we see caricatures and other commentary online talking about how the provision of money by the Biden administration to the regime is in great part responsible for the regime feeling strong enough, appeased enough to push for the October 7th attack and then to attack Israel with direct missiles and drones. So the money has been there, and that's why we see what we see.
Mariam Measi, great to talk to you. Thank you very much. Well, Avi Pazna and Hanan Geffen are both with me in the studio. And Avi, Israel will be watching very closely what's happening inside Iran, what we can see in terms of the videos and other things that are circulating.
Yes, of course, the inside Iran is completely different from what you see from the outside. I believe that there's a very strong opposition to the regime of the Ayatollah. You cannot give a number, but I do believe that the majority of Iranians despise this kind of regime. You know, it's now almost 45 years that we have this regime. Those regimes are not eternal. Look what happened in the Soviet Union. Look what happened in Romania. I mean, there will be a time when the people of Iran, and there are 100 million Iranians, most of whom are very unhappy with this backward regime. And you can see that there are demonstrations, especially by women who are the more hurt by the regime Islamic rules, but not only women. And I believe if we have the time, we will see a friendly Iran like it was before the Ayatollah.
Right, and Hanan Geffen, you know, a lot of people have pointed out that just imagine if those missiles had been nuclear missiles. Iran is said to be advancing rapidly with its nuclear program. The Americans and the Europeans are talking about increasing sanctions, but I mean, what is your outlook more broadly for Iran? Can it afford this war? Does it want this war?
Well, this is a very difficult question because you know, U.S. taking on itself to make sure that Iran will not be a nuclear one, not only because of Israel, because of Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, all the region, and also Europe, because Iranian beyond this regime there is a spirit. A revolutionary spirit of spreading the Shia version of Islam all over the countries, Syria, in Yemen. and in Europe. This is the spirit that drives Khamenei, the leader, the supreme leader of Iran. So once there is a nuclear, it destabilizes. But I would like to return to two aspects of the internal sides of Iran. First of all, Iranians until 1979 were trained and by Israelis. The intelligence were reached higher level because of our trainers, the Mossad, the military. We trained them until 1979, and they started from relatively high point. This is one aspect. The other one is we want to make sure that the message is driven to the Iranian regime. Do not mess with Israel because we are going to hurt where you are really vulnerable, the inside problems that Avi mentioned. Now, the question is, I would say that the Israeli planners, Mossad and military, trying to find targets that will enhance this kind of opposition. I would say, just to be creative.
To support the opposition.
Yeah, just to be creative. Try to imagine that suddenly all the signs in Tehran with the Israeli flag go on Israel.
You're talking about a cyber attack?
Yes, a kind of cyber attack. Just to be creative. I don't know if they will manage to do it. But this is kind of will incite and will be a drive home the message, don't mess with Israel.
Okay, so you think a cyber attack would be enough? It would be
no. It will be the ground music.
A cyber attack can be part of something bigger.
It will be the ground music, the background music.
Yeah.
It has to be something which hurts, not the civilian population. Not the civilian population, but the regime. We have to find targets that hurt the regime image and power. This is what we have to try to find without causing civilian death.
We'll see how
because that would be counterproductive. That would be a boomerang.
The military goes to the drawing table to come up with the right solution. That the government will say, "Okay, go ahead."
Many considerations to take into account, and as Israel has said,
that's why it's taken such a long time to decide.
It's not a discussion whether or not. It's what should be the target.
Okay, well, there are reports that the Iranian attack has prompted the IDF to delay plans for an offensive in Rafah, the southernmost city in Gaza. And on Monday, Hamas rejected the latest offer of a ceasefire in exchange for the release of the hostages. 133 hostages are still being held in Gaza and have been for over 6 months now. Well, let's go to the south of Israel. We're joined by our correspondent, Zack A. Zack, has the war in Gaza hit a kind of an impasse?
It's hard to say, but when you look out over the north half of the Gaza Strip, you continue to see the airstrikes taking place. Earlier this afternoon, we heard the 50 caliber of helicopters flying overhead, their guns going off. So it seems like this fight just never ends. And in the what we understand of the ground situation, now that the IDF has pulled out brigades from the south, remains in the central area of the Gaza Strip, that the people, the civilians within Gaza are left with a lot of questions. They want to know where they can go. We've seen over the last 24, 48 hours that huge swaths of people, thousands, have attempted on the coastal road to make their way into the north half of the Gaza Strip. The IDF was apparently turning people away. Some were able to make it on their way to Gaza City. This is the kind of thing that we had many questions about before, throughout this entire conflict. But within the last few months, we've been asking a lot of questions as this has reached this stage, as to, with the IDF telling us that Hamas has been moving among the civilian populations, what methods are going to be in place to stop that? If there's going to seriously be a flush of people who can move above ground and hide themselves among women and children, how is the IDF going to manage and facilitate some kind of security situation on the ground level? And again, this is what we see, the movement of people who are, if they're in Rafah, being told that there's this impending, this looming moment when Rafah is going to become a scene like what they left, like in Khan Yunis and Gaza City. So we continue to see the messaging be put on hold just as much as the Rafah operation. The IDF saying we're not there yet. We're not sure what is going to happen, and so they have not been communicating. There was an expected pamphlet drop that was supposed to take place yesterday. It's unclear whether or not that actually went through with instructions for the people inside Rafah. So again, it does feel like it's at an impasse, and there's just so many questions left unanswered, especially with this Rafah operation. When will it happen, and when are all those people going to need to move? What instructions will they get? That is left unclear.
Yeah, a lot of question marks over what's happening in Gaza, and of course this is terrible for the families of the 133 hostages who are still being held in Gaza. Their loved ones once again knocked off the headlines. A terrible wait for them.
And they've left the headlines, but the last 2 weeks of headlines that they were experiencing were devastating. We had the U.S. officials, the Biden administration saying they believe most of those hostages remaining in Gaza are dead. No more update beyond that. So you're just left with this question mark of, well, what does that mean? Where's this intelligence coming from? And then you get Hamas apparently coming to this the negotiation table with this message that even though you're asking for 40 hostages in exchange for hundreds of Palestinian prisoners, we can't produce proof of life for 40 hostages. We're unable to be able to account for where they are, the women, the children, the elderly. And so the negotiating team then comes back with an update over the last 24 hours that now Hamas is saying they want this latest deal to be 20 hostages in exchange for the same number, if not more, of Palestinian prisoners. So you're right, for those hostage families who, again, every night have been out there in Hostage Square or applying pressure wherever they can. We see the demonstrations every day. The headlines are devastating, and they don't get any better. And there is really that if there's any sign of hope, no one knows really where to look for it, because no official in the U.S., no official in Israel has been able to say with any certainty that we're any closer to a deal that could at least get a few, just maybe even just one out. No one knows that's even possible.
Zach, thank you very much. Zack A just there in the south of Israel. Well, to talk more about diminishing hopes of a hostage release deal, we're joined now by Ramy A. He's the former head of Mossad's Missing in Action unit. Thank you very much for being with us, Ramy. So a lot going on, but how does this situation with Iran, which is dominating world headlines, affect the prospect of any kind of hostage deal?
I don't think the Iranians are in any way connected to the question of the deal. The Iranians have done two things which are important vis-a-vis the Hamas. One thing, they have attacked Israel from Iran, and they have crossed a border that has never been crossed before. And the second thing, which is very important, they found out that their weapons are not very effective against Israel. Israeli technology and Air Force power have nulled their trying to hit Israel. So this, by the way, is a lesson that Hezbollah has to learn, and the Hamas as well. I don't think it has any relevance. The Hamas has, from moment one, said the same thing. It has all the time said we want cessation of hostilities on the one hand, and the retreat of Israeli forces from the Gaza Strip. In other words, the reinstatement of the Hamas sovereignty in the Gaza Strip, something that Israel cannot comply with. So all the talk about a deal along these months, a couple of Palestinians more, a couple of Palestinians less, all kinds of keys to the exchange are irrelevant. The only relevant thing is Hamas's insistence on the continuation of Hamas sovereignty in the Gaza Strip. And the only way to deal with that is to create an alternative, a political alternative in the Gaza Strip to Hamas. Hamas has to feel that somebody else is giving out the aid, somebody else is in charge of the police, somebody else is the sovereign in the Gaza Strip.
And there is a lot of pressure on Israel not to respond to Iran. There's also a great deal of pressure on Israel not to go into Rafah, the southernmost city in Gaza. I mean, from a negotiation point of view, why would Sinwar negotiate when it is looking increasingly unlikely that Israel will be able to go into Rafah?
No, first of all, Hamas is looking around the world and is very encouraged by the way that the West is dealing with Israel. The pressure not to go into Rafah, the UN resolution that was against Israel, and other things. But I think that the West does not understand a very, very important thing about our neighborhood. Our neighborhood, unfortunately, is a neighborhood that is run by force, and Israel is complied to retaliate to the Iranian attack. Otherwise, the message will be that you can do it again. And it has to be made clear that if you do it again, you will pay a very heavy price. Israel can inflict a very heavy price on Iran. And the other message that should be clear to the Hamas, what happened in the 7th of October is really the end of Hamas as a political entity. No more sovereignty for Hamas in Gaza, come what may.
Ramy A, thank you very much. Pastor, just two questions. Can the IDF still go into Rafah? And in terms of the hostages, we're now talking about 20 hostages. That's what Hamas are now talking about. And still they won't agree to any kind of deal.
Look, Laura, it's clear that the Hamas has hardened its position on the hostages, partly because of the pressure on the government of Israel. Internal pressure. They see what's going on in Israel. Also, by the way, some American pressure. You remember that Biden said that Netanyahu is not doing enough regarding the hostages? So they've hardened their position. And it is very worrying, the fact that they say now we are speaking about 20 humanitarian hostages. Maybe really they don't have 40 humanitarian hostages. I don't know. It can either be a hardening of position, or, on the contrary, that they don't have the numbers required for a deal. But definitively, I am convinced that we have to, you asked about Rafah, we have to apply military pressure on Hamas. If not, there will not be a deal.
Hanan, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we are just 2 months of negotiation with the American president involved, and the Egyptian president, and the Qatari prime minister, and the head of the Mossad, and the head of the CIA, and everybody come up morning and evening with the announcement, we are proceeding here. And then it turned out that it was a joke. Hamas did not enter the game. Not only came to square one, he was not in the game. The Hamas representative in Qatar were just not informed, to say the least. Cheating might be the other solution. Qatar is playing with them along. And then the Americans say, we don't know what happened. They are very disappointed.
All right. Hanan Geffen, Avi Pazner, thank you very much indeed to you both.
Thank you very much.
Well, one of the Israeli pilots who took part in that defence mission on Saturday night has been speaking about his experience. There's more in this report from Dikshi Arvind.
It was a huge operation. It's in these moments that you know why you get involved. This is what we trained so hard for.
The night between Saturday to Sunday was one of the most dramatic nights Israel experienced, crowned with the unprecedented success with all of Israel's technological means.
There was really a lot of tension in the air. We wondered what we expected of ourselves, our skills. We were impatient to be seated in the cockpit. You also think a lot about your family, best friends, who you want to protect.
During the night, from Saturday to Sunday, Iran fired more than 300 missiles, suicide drones, and ballistic missiles towards Israel. Israel destroyed almost all of them and declared a 99% success rate. IDF pilots and air defense have trained for years for such a scenario.
Since then, the tension's been increasing, and last Saturday evening, we understood that the Iranian attack was imminent. This Saturday, things became clearer. We were called to join our squadrons. At 7:30 p.m., everyone was there, ready to carry out their mission. The feelings varied between emotion and a rather strange impression, as with every new situation you're going to be confronted with.
On Saturday, we received confirmation of the operation and began arming the planes with appropriate ammunition, and technicians had to work extremely quickly to equip the planes with air-to-air missiles capable of destroying the engaged targets. Reservists were mobilized, including crews arriving from all corners of the country. Thanks to very precise intelligence information, we were able to achieve an unprecedented result with our pilots. Then, as soon as the missiles arrived in the area, we were able to destroy almost all of them.
Pilots climb into their cockpits and take off for an air battle reminiscent of other, older wars.
When you take off, you know your mission. You become one with your aircraft. You have the controls in hand, and as soon as you arrive in the area, you must trust yourself. It's for this particular moment that we're prepared.
They take off and the eyes of an entire nation are fixed on them.
As soon as we knew the missiles had been fired, formation of 4 planes takes off and they start taking down the targets. We arrive in an already engaged sector with many targets to destroy. You have to locate your target with certainty. Don't confuse it with a light civilian aircraft or something else that could mislead you. What you see in front of you is the road to your house, and you have no other choice to destroy the target so it does not reach your house.
What do you see with the naked eye from your cockpit?
First of all, many screens. In any case, it's already dark and it's a desert area. It's not very well lit. The first thing you really see at night is the release of your missiles. It's a trace in the sky, and 2 or 3 seconds later, the explosion when you hit your target. You tell yourself that everything is fine and you move on to the next target. We are at war. I think of my brothers, of my friends who are fighting, including one of my best friends who died in combat 3 months ago. I think of him, of my own family. It reminds me of what I do.
Lieutenant G, 27 years old, has taken part in numerous attacks in southern Lebanon, as well as on the Gaza front in recent months, but this time the mission is very different.
The first difficulty is to recognize your target. Then, once the target is locked, I give authorization to the pilot to shoot it down. 2 or 3 seconds later, there's a big explosion in front of your eyes and the target crashes to the ground. Then you work on hitting the targets one after another. This usually happens at high altitude.
As soon as this historic night ends, we return to normality, although for Lieutenant G, it's not totally over. When you get off the plane, what is the first thing you do? Do you talk to your parents?
The first message was from my partner, that the night went well, that I love her, we'll see each other in the morning.
Are you preparing for what's next?
Of course, all the time. We never know what's coming, and we force ourselves to be ready for all possible scenarios. We look forward, and we don't get stuck in a situation, even if it's extreme. Without forgetting, it could be repeated tomorrow, and we'll have to be very concentrated and precise to succeed once again protecting civilians and preventing any incursion of flying objects that could harm our homes.
That's it from me. Stay tuned. Kalev Ben David is up next. This is I24 News. Good night.
Tel Aviv is ranked the happiest city in the world and the best place to own a home. For 3 generations, the Ben Shalom family has built boutique apartment buildings in the most desirable locations. From restoration in historical locales to homes along Park HaYarkon, Ben Shalom is a one-stop shop from start to finish and friends for life.
Esta semana en News 24, Israel bajo ataque. News 24 en español trae el análisis y la información de los acontecimientos de la guerra, Espadas de Hierro.
Entrevistas exclusivas, reportes desde la zona de guerra, la reacción de los países hispanoparlantes.
News 24, el único medio en español que te mantiene informado y conectado con la comunidad latina en Israel. News 24, únicamente en I24 News.
Welcome to this special broadcast on I24 News. I'm Caleb Ben David. It is day 193 of Israel's at war. In the north, the IDF continues to trade blows with Hezbollah across the Lebanon border, today taking out one of its top field commanders. In Gaza, the army launches a strike on Rafah, targeting terrorists there, amid questions over when Israel will finally move into Hamas's last stronghold in the Strip. An IDF spokesperson, Daniel Hagari, warning Iran today that it won't get off scot-free for Sunday's air attack, as the War Cabinet met again to discuss the how, the when, and the how much of that response will take place. Ari Waldman has more on that in this report.
Israel has vowed a response to Iran's massive air assault on the Jewish state. 350 ballistic missiles and drones were launched on Saturday night. 99% were shot down.
We are closely assessing the situation. We remain at our highest level of readiness. Iran will face the consequences for its actions. We will choose our response accordingly.
The question now is, how will Israel respond and when? The scope of the threat was unprecedented. Iran launched enough firepower to level a city. That it was stopped with only superficial damage has afforded Israel some leeway in its response.
Either in Iran or outside Iran. Inside Iran, strategic targets like military bases, air bases, nuclear facilities. These are some of the components, maybe also some symbols, state symbols of Iran, which would mean definitely hitting at the mullahs, and this could be also a choice.
Israel has signaled it will hit Iran in a way that hurts, without provoking an all-out war. NBC reports and cites U.S. officials that the U.S. believes Israel will limit the attack to Iranian proxies in the region, likely IRGC affiliates in Syria. But a response that's too limited risks giving Iran a sense of impunity and setting a precedent for such large-scale air assaults. And that means the possibility of a strike on Iran's nuclear program that has the UN worried.
We are always concerned about this possibility. What I can tell you is that our inspectors in Iran were informed by the Iranian government that on the yesterday all the nuclear facilities that we are inspecting every day would remain closed on security considerations.
Unlikely targets include Iran's soft underbelly, its oil and gas infrastructure. The United States would heavily oppose any actions that would spike oil prices during an election year. In any strike option, the enemy also gets a say, and the whole Middle East now hangs on the precipice of total war.
And here's what the IDF spokesperson Daniel Hagari had to say this afternoon.
Something else have happened. This coalition is directing a message to Iran. We will not allow this aggression in the region. This coalition is an opportunity for the Middle East, a strategic opportunity for the Middle East, for countries who share the same threat from Iran. Firing 110 ballistic missiles directly to Israel will not get scot-free. We will respond in our time, in our place, in the way that we will choose.
For more, let's go to our correspondent, Balir Sladin, who's outside IDF headquarters, the Kiryat here in Tel Aviv. And Balir, for the third day in a row, the War Cabinet meeting, do we believe that there is now a decision made about how and when to respond to Iran after that air attack this weekend?
Yes, in fact, for the third day in a row and for the fifth time, the cabinet is meeting today. As we see, Gantz has said today that there will be a response, but from a strategic point of view, he's saying in a conference for the newspaper Israel-Hayom, he said that the response will be in a time and a place that Israel chooses and it suits it. And also he is adding that Iran failed and because of the Israeli technology and diplomacy. So Israel is actually finding or sensing that this coalition that we've seen on Saturday night is something that needs to actually to coordinate with, and of course needs to take its benefits after all. So we are saying this, of course, in the background of the international pressure on Israel not to respond. Today, the foreign minister of Germany, Annalena Baerbock, will visit Israel. It's, of course, her main aim of this visit is to pressure Israel not to respond, or at least not to conduct a major attack against Iran. They are, of course, hoping to preserve the stability of this region. And what's interesting is that most of Israelis are actually against an attack against Iran, because the Hebrew University conducted a survey today saying that 52% of Israelis are actually against any attack against Iran, and maybe even those who support an attack, only 1 out of 4 of them, so like 25% of them only actually support an attack against Iran on its soil. So something that, of course, will escalate the situation even more, something that the Israelis don't want to see, because they think, and they're not wrong about this, that the main goal right now is actually to resolve the situation in Gaza, to bring back the hostages. We're here also in the hostages square. That's where we're hearing from the families, and of course to eliminate this threat that is in Gaza, which is Hamas, of course. So that's, of course, a dilemma here in the Israeli public, and also, I guess, in the Israeli political level.
Right, and we have heard that there have been disagreements, even in the War Cabinet, about how to best proceed on the Iran attack, and it's a matter of setting priorities as well. Balir Sladin, outside IDF headquarters, thank you for that. We're joined in studio now by Yaki Dayan, the former Israeli consul in Los Angeles, and the Reserves Lieutenant Colonel Doron Avital, the former commander of Special Forces in the IDF. And Doron, a hint there from Benny Gantz that the response to Iran may not be a outright attack, certainly not on an attack against Iran on Iranian soil. So what could it look like? What would you recommend the response to be?
If I had the maps here, I would have made a...
I don't want you to give away any secrets, but in general.
Yeah. But I would say the following. First of all, when you make a decision to go about this attack, you have to prepare the forces. You have to make the plan. So I think the decision that are made right now is to see that all the venues are open. So we can go from venues like cyber attacks. We have a powerful tools, and I think if there's a venue that the U.S. would support, cyber attacks against infrastructure in Iran, this can go...
Or the nuclear facilities, as we've seen in the past.
Before, many years ago, I mean, when we are still doing. Of course, secretive operation for sure against generals, leaders, wherever. This is, of course, part of the secretive war we are having. And then you have, of course, Iranian targets outside of Iran. And then in the end limit, of course, you have this strike that people talk about, this Air Force strike, against some infrastructure, it can be a nuclear facility, which is part of the old scheme that we have. This looks to me right now not the best venue in this context, and for sure not a venue to be taken without some kind of sync with the U.S., because what we have seen, and I think the spokesman talked about strategic opportunity, let's not spoil.
Well, I want to pick up on that, Yaki, with you, because we've seen countries like Jordan, even countries that may deny it for the time being, reportedly Saudi Arabia, the UAE, cooperating. We heard a hint of that there. In fact, Secretary of State Blinken is due on Cairo on Thursday to meet with the leaders of the 6 sort of Sunni moderate Arab states, building maybe that Arab NATO against Iran. So certainly that's got to be factor in the decision making on how to respond to Iran.
Absolutely. I think that there are 3 elements that have to be taken into consideration. The first one is updating the United States. This has to be with some kind of correlation with the United States, not surprising the United States. I would say that's the first element. The second element is maintaining the coalition that was built. This is extremely important for Israel. And the third element is making sure that any response will not open an overall war. So if you take into consideration those 3 elements, the Israeli response would be under those constraints, and only then Israel can respond and get the support of the international community. And there is another very important element, which is it's not only a military attack, but what Israel has to make sure that there is a diplomatic, economic attack. Because one of the major achievements of 4 days ago, is the fact that Iran is back into the focus of the international community. And what you want to have is to rally the international community to have new sanctions on Iran, on the financial sector, on the oil sector, and for sure on the nuclear sector.
Right, so it certainly opens opportunities for Israel on the nuclear issue. Perhaps there'll be follow-up on there. Now, let's look at northern Israel. We're not seeing that big attacks that we might have been concerned about, either from some of the Iranian proxies, but there were further clashes on Israel's northern border that have seen 2 airstrikes today in southern Lebanon, reportedly killing 3 Hezbollah operatives, including an important field commander. Meanwhile, a Hezbollah drone strike inside Israel territory took place, wounding 3. Rocket sirens sounding throughout the day. Our correspondent Robert Swift has more.
The skies above Lebanon and Israel were busy Tuesday afternoon. An explosion destroyed a car in southern Lebanon, in Inbal, close to Tyre. A prominent Hezbollah field commander was killed in an Israeli airstrike. Ismail Yusuf Baz, responsible for Hezbollah artillery rocket units in southwestern Lebanon, was the target of the assassination, the Israeli military said. Hezbollah confirmed his death. An additional airstrike occurred in southern Lebanon shortly thereafter. Not far away, on the other side of the border, another attack took place, close to the Israeli city of Kiryat Shmona. Without triggering an aircraft infiltration siren, 2 UAVs crossed into Israeli airspace. wounding 3 people in an explosive attack. Hezbollah said that it launched the drones and that it was targeting an Israeli Iron Dome missile battery. It also claimed responsibility for artillery attacks and an anti-tank missile launch in the same area, citing the strike in Ain Bal as justification. The Israeli military reported that rockets were launched into its territory in the western and upper Galilee, causing fires but no casualties. Only a few days ago, it was feared that Israel-Iran tensions could cause the border with Lebanon to flare up. But now the IDF and Hezbollah have already returned to the day-to-day routine that has persisted here for the last 6 months.
And for more, let's go to our correspondent, Pia Stekelbach, who's in northern Israel near the Lebanese border. And Pia, just I see in the past couple of minutes, more air raid sirens there, showing what an active area that continues to be today.
Indeed, kind of a very eventful evening. Rocket alert sirens now going off in communities towards the western side of the Israel-Lebanon border. That is just as Hezbollah claimed responsibility for another rocket launch of Katyusha rockets towards the area of Kiryat Shmone. In total, Hezbollah claimed responsibility for 6 cross-border attacks, including rockets, including artillery. It all started when this morning a UAV, or actually 2 UAVs, exploded above the community of Bet Hillel in the eastern part of the Israel-Lebanon border, as we heard in the report, injuring 3. Then that Israeli drone strike in Tyre, in the area of Tyre, that killed the Hezbollah commander, Ismail Youssef Baz. He was confirmed to have been killed by Hezbollah, but he's not the only one that Hezbollah said was killed today. It just announced that another of its operatives was killed in southern Lebanon today. That might indicate that the second strike that was reported, the second drone strike on 2 vehicles traveling in southern Lebanon, might have claimed him as one of the casualties. We can expect more retaliation from Hezbollah for that killed commander. In total, Hezbollah has announced that more than 270 of its operatives were killed since the cross-border attacks started on October the 8th. And Israel has time and time again struck senior commanders directly, also in the area of Tyre. So what we've seen today, an operation very similar to the one we have seen today, occurred about a month ago when Israel, also via drone strike, took out a Hamas military member exactly in that area, also via a drone strike on a car there. So as Israel is now evaluating a potential retaliation to the Iranian strike, it also carefully is monitoring the skies here on the northern front, and the clashes, the cross-border attacks with Hezbollah are certainly continuing. We have been seeing rocket alert sirens going off in different communities in northern Israel, from the east to the west, basically. So it is a very eventful night here, and as we've just seen, another round of rocket alert sirens have been going off in the western areas. However, besides the 3 that were lightly injured when these 2 UAVs exploded in the early afternoon, there was no reports of injuries or damage on the Israeli side so far today, Kalev.
All right, Pia Stekelbach there near the Lebanese border in northern Israel. Thank you for that, Pia. And Doron, we're seeing, again, Israel following the same strategy that it has, not been changed by the Iran attack, neither Hezbollah. But I think you raised the possibility of maybe Israel extending its response outside Iran. But the question is, that may not generate a direct attack from Iran like the one we had this weekend, but it could bring about an intensified response from Hezbollah.
For sure. If we'll attack in Iran, Iran can use its proxy to create some...
Or even outside Iran, potentially.
Of course, for sure. I'm saying in terms of the strategy versus Hezbollah, we didn't change the strategy. Whenever we have the possibility, the opportunity to target leaders or soldiers of Hezbollah, we did it. This is a very successful operation. It means we have very good intelligence and we caught the window of opportunity and we execute it. This is the way we operate. I think in terms of our strategy in the north, it works, putting aside the fact that our citizens are not back in their homes. But apart from that, they are paying dearly for their engagement with us. We have here and there they succeed, and we right now hear about sirens in the north. In the certain moment, we are prepared in terms of ground operation if we need in the southern strip of Lebanon. We heard about a simulation exercise that the IDF completed lately. But the question is whether we need to use a real maneuver in southern Lebanon, or there would be some diplomatic resolution.
I'm going to go to Yaki because just yesterday we noted 6 months since the start of the evacuation of the civilians, over 60,000 from northern Lebanon. And while we can talk about what could be done against Hezbollah and against Iran, every action like that puts the date of those return of those civilians a little further.
So Caleb, here it depends how you look at it, but the United States is dictating the rules of this conflict.
At least in the north, for sure.
In the north, in Lebanon.
Yeah.
Because the United States clearly doesn't want to see any expansion of the war. 2024, this is an election year in the United States, and they're dictating the rules of this conflict, meaning that no one wants to see an extension of this war because Israel wants to finish the front in Gaza. But nevertheless, even if Israel would have wanted to expand this war, we heavily depends on the ammunition coming from the United States. And here there is a problem. But clearly, and I agree with Doron, the main goal is returning the Israeli refugees back to their homes as soon as possible. And if this conflict continues like that, that would be impossible. In the very beginning, it was a big mistake, as I see it, to evacuate those people from there, because now it's very difficult to bring them back. But nevertheless, we have to give ourselves a deadline, and also to the Americans, to this conflict, because otherwise it would be very hard to keep those Israeli refugees outside their homes, meaning that we have to tell the Americans, listen, up to this date, we are willing to play according to your rules of the conflict. If it doesn't work, then you'll have to play according to our rules of the conflict.
Right. I'll just say one of those refugees told us the other night that some of his neighbors are talking about leaving the north altogether, which is not what Israel wants to see, a depopulated north. Well, since you mentioned aid from Israel, Yaki, Iran's unprecedented attack on Israel this weekend has put renewed pressure on the U.S. to pass an international aid bill, which has been stuck in Congress for months. Now the U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson says he has divided the bill into 4 components and will bring it to a vote as soon as Friday. Senior correspondent Bianca Zanini has a story.
Despite months of delay, America will send aid to its allies in need, says Washington.
We have terrorists and tyrants and terrible leaders around the world like Putin and Xi and in Iran, and they're watching to see if America will stand up for its allies and in our own interest around the globe, and we will.
But U.S. aid has been delayed for more than 2 months after the Senate passed a $95 billion aid bill, which included $14 billion for Israel and $60 billion for Ukraine. Now, Republican Speaker Mike Johnson says he divided the bill into 4 separate bills, which could be brought to a vote as soon as this Friday.
What we'll do is bring to the House floor independent measures. We won't be voting on the Senate supplemental in its current form, but we will vote on each of these measures separately in 4 different pieces. We will vote on the Israel aid, on the aid to Ukraine, on the aid to the Indo-Pacific, and then another measure that has our national security priorities included.
Johnson is facing pressure from the Republicans, which have pushed against the aid to Ukraine.
The fact that we in Ukraine have been waiting months for a vital support package, the fact that we are still waiting for a vote in Congress, testifies to the fact that the confidence of terrorists has also been growing for months. You can't waste any more time. It is necessary to really protect life, wherever there is a terrorist threat to it.
Adding a 4th bill, which includes domestic security issues, making part of the aid to Ukraine into a zero-interest loan, and voting on the 4 separately, makes all of them more likely to pass, hopes Johnson. A new sense of urgency was placed on passing the aid packages after Iran's massive missile and drone attack on Israel over the weekend.
For more, let's go to our senior U.S. correspondent, Mike Wagenheim in New York. And Mike, is this finally splitting these into 4 bills a recipe for finally passing the aid bills, including to Israel? Or is it a recipe for bringing the downfall of yet another Republican House Speaker?
The ingredients are definitely there, but the process of actually cooking it and getting it onto the plate is a much different story. There's so many moving parts right now. First off, you have those 4 separate bills, Ukraine, Israel, Taiwan, and sort of a grab bag of national security priorities. for the Republican Party. Here's a problem with that. What happens if you pass those bills in the House and then the Senate elects to pick and choose which ones they want to pass as well? Maybe they pass Ukraine, but they don't wind up passing the Israel bill because of opposition in the Democratic Party. Well, where does that leave Israel aid? That's one thing that the Republican Party is trying to work through right now. Another thing is, well, there are amendments and other add-ons that the Republican Party wants in these House bills. Well, will those add-ons kind of push Democrats away from supporting it? And then you've got Johnson's speakership is possibly up for grabs right now. You've got two hard right Republicans in the House who are threatening and might very well go through with a motion to vacate, which would put up a vote for Johnson's speakership. He might be ousted just as Kevin McCarthy was a few months ago. Well, that will leave the House in complete chaos. Will Democrats use that to their advantage now? Will Democrats come along and say, we'll save your speakership, but we want X, Y, and Z, and possibly some of those foreign aid priorities mixed in there? So a whole lot of different components right now. Republicans and Democrats are kind of feeling out the process right now. There is an aim, a target to get these bills on the House floor on Friday, but so much to work through right now. And Democrats might have to bail out Mike Johnson, and it will be costly for Johnson if they do. There will be a price extracted from the House Speaker if it comes to that.
Right. We should note the Republicans, I'm right, it's just a one-seat majority, I believe, in the House of Representatives, two-seat, I'm sorry, I'm corrected, two-seat majority, very precarious. And if Mike Johnson survives this with Democratic backing, you have to expect that his number could be up, unless Donald Trump can somehow, again, come to his rescue. Mike, former President Trump is a little occupied these days. Go on, Mike.
It's a two-seat majority, but there's another Republican whose resignation is effective at the end of this week. Another thing to keep in mind. So the majority gets even slimmer at the end of the week. So many moving parts right now.
Okay, thank you, Mike Wagenheim, for that. Yaki, to put this in a bigger perspective, that just a couple of days after an unprecedented attack by Iran against Israel, an aid bill to Israel would be such a complicated and precarious measure to pass in the U.S. Congress. I think is a symptom of a much larger problem for Israel in the Congress and in the U.S. right now.
Absolutely. I mean, the political debate between the Republicans and the Democrats is extremely unfortunate. Although we saw both the Republicans and the Democrats standing as supporting Israel against the Iranians, but such a bill would complicate the entire issue, because then it moved back to the Senate. Not necessarily the Senate would approve that, and there's so many complications there. Not necessarily that the House, the majority of the House would support that, and then it postponed the entire bill, and that would be very difficult, because at least half of the $14 billion of aid to Israel is for the air defense,
right.
And something which is extremely needed, and that's a show of support now by the Congress, extremely needed, and because of the political debate in Washington, D.C., that would be extremely shameful.
Right, just a clarification. The differences between Republican and Democrats, but also between Republicans themselves and Democrats themselves, and that has really complicated things for Israel now. Yaki Dayan, Doron Avital, please do stay with us. We are going out for a brief break, but we'll return with more. It is day 193 of Israel at war. We'll be back in a few minutes. Stay with us.
I-24 News Channel, broadcasting from Israel, with dozens of correspondents throughout the world, brings the truth from Israel to hundreds of millions of people in scores of countries.
Completely gunned down in their beds. De la frontière qui sépare Israël.
The state of emergency and war in Israel. Bringing Israel's story to the world. I-24 News Channels. Now on Hot.
Welcome back to this special broadcast on I-24 News, day 193 of Israel at war. Let's turn now to the Gaza battlefield. Now, while the country in the war wait to see if and when the IDF makes its long-awaited offensive into Rafah, the Israeli military continues its targeted operations on Hamas's last stronghold, an airstrike today that took out at least 3 Palestinians in the Strip's southernmost city. And amid signs that some of the tens of thousands of internal refugees in Rafah are trying to return home, the IDF reportedly dropped leaflets warning them not to go back yet to northern Gaza because the area is still a dangerous combat zone. For more, let's go to our correspondent, Zack A, down on the Israel-Gaza border. And let's talk a little more detail about what happened there in Rafah, especially today, and in other parts, even in northern Gaza as well, Zack.
Yeah, this is something that was anticipated a bit because we had been told that there was going to be some communication to the people that are in Rafah, the civilian population. Just wasn't clear when exactly that was going to be or what that would look like. And it has in the past been these pamphlet drops. The question that we had out to the IDF earlier after the Khan Yunis withdrawal was what was the immediate messaging that was being sent to the civilian population? Were they being told to stay where they are, do not go north? Because the messaging that was publicly available, what was making the headlines for so long, was this looming Rafah operation. So we had seen Palestinians in Arabic media saying that they were concerned that, you know, they knew what the military might looks like, and to know that it's coming their direction, that they wanted to leave, or that they felt like this was something that now would be the time to go. Wasn't clear whether it was safe or not to go back into the Khan Yunis area. So we are seeing thousands of Palestinians leaving, trying to get north. We know that there's been some blocked at that corridor, the Netzarim corridor. They've been told to turn around. There was confrontations and potentially some exchange of gunfire that took place the other day as thousands were taking that corridor along the coast to try and get towards Gaza City and were turned back. So right now, as of tonight, the question is, where is that Rafah operation stand? We know that the War Cabinet has reportedly postponed the date, even though Prime Minister Netanyahu said a date was set. Now this has been pushed back with the happenings of Iran. But from the latest that we'd heard, the IDF's concerned about the enormity of the task of moving people, evacuating people from Rafah, the civilian population, and where they will go. And that's the first and foremost concern.
All right, Zack Anders there along the Israel-Gaza border. Thank you for that. And Doron, I want to ask you about that because we don't know when the Rafah operation, but it certainly couldn't happen until the civilians, some of those civilians there, start moving north. The IDF, in fact, telling the civilians not to go back. There was some tank movements in Beit Hanun today, but clearly at some point that process has to start. We have to think about the soldiers there and the hostages that may be held in Rafah.
So first of all, the strategy right now, we divide the north and the south with this one brigade. We sit on the perimeter and we act either airstrike or raids of special forces or brigades that are entering upon some intelligence. And we prepare for Rafah, and we wait to see whether something would come out from the hostage deal that right now seems we are less optimistic that the possibility or the visibility of such an agreement. And our attention went to Iran right now, so we are back to the game. When Rafah, this is the question on the table, and what does it mean, Rafah? It might be also that we'll go to some limited campaigns, not a campaign, a massive campaign that would require really to transfer all the civilians, and this is a big task, a tall order, and I know the army is preparing how to do it, but it's not a simple solution, and it would not go without some objection also from the outside. Many decisions, many trade-offs in terms of the decision.
Prime Minister Netanyahu said he had circled the date on his calendar, but you have to wonder if...
But I would say, Kalev, that this is very unfortunate that we don't have such a date because, in terms of priorities, we're discussing so much Iran, but bringing back the hostages, I would say this is the highest priority that Israel has right now. And if we think about the fact that there is no more deal on the table because the Hamas clearly refused to the deal. They don't feel that they are in pressure, in a hurry to accept any deal because right now you don't have army in Khan Yunis. I mean, the army is out. You tripled the humanitarian aid, so you don't have real leverages pressuring the Hamas, and they don't have the incentive to agree to any deal. So Rafah is becoming much more acute, much more, we are in a hurry to do that because otherwise you won't have any leverage pressuring Hamas. So it's that and the United States pressuring Qatar to deport the Hamas leadership from Qatar and use much more their force over there, because otherwise, if we don't use those leverages, Hamas don't have any leverages or any incentive, to move on the hostage deal.
The fate of the hostages have to always remain at the top of the agenda.
Absolutely.
Of course. Well, let's move on to look at some of the impact of the Gaza war abroad. The viral videos of bullied Jewish students and vandalized hostage awareness posters, these were just the tip of the iceberg of anti-Semitic incidents since October 7th. The Anti-Defamation League, the ADL, has now published its annual anti-Semitism report for 2023, and the numbers are there to prove it, even as the debate intensifies in the U.S. over just what, and not just the U.S., over just what constitutes as anti-Semitic expression. More on this report from Emmanuel Onorat.
A new record was broken, and it's not one to be proud of. The Anti-Defamation League, which records anti-Semitic incidents in the U.S. each year, reports that 8,873 such incidents took place in 2023. That's an increase of 140% since 2022, but also the highest amount ever recorded since 1979, when the organization started keeping track of anti-Semitism. According to the study, the dramatic increase took place between October 7th and the end of October 2023, of which the ADL counted 5,204 incidents. That's more than the total for the year of 2022. With 52% of the 2023 incidents including references to Israel's war on Hamas and Gaza, the lines get quickly blurred between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. Lines that the U.S. is trying to clarify. The House of Representatives submitted a vote Tuesday on whether or not the slogan, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," is an anti-Semitic one. The slogan is popular with opponents of Israel's war in Gaza. The resolution put in motion states that the slogan is calling for the eradication of the State of Israel, and that it implies the removal of Jewish people from Israel located between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. But with that being said, the debate of what exactly is anti-Semitism is a very real one. with many saying that anti-Zionism is not inherently anti-Semitic. Known anti-Israel U.S. Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib tweeted back in November that the slogan, "From the River to the Sea," is an aspirational call for freedom, human rights, and peaceful coexistence, not death, destruction, or hate. To which the Israeli embassy replied that no verbal acrobatics can hide the true meaning behind the slogan, namely the obliteration of the State of Israel, adding that Hamas' charter clearly states that it rejects any alternative to the full and complete liberation of Palestine from the river to the sea. A rallying cry it may be for those protesting against Israel, and the meaning may well be in the eye of the beholder. But with the soaring incidence of anti-Semitism recorded since October 7th linked to the anti-Israel protests, that distinction is of little comfort for American Jews concerned for their safety.
And joining us now from New York is the CEO and National Director of the Anti-Defamation League, Jonathan Greenblatt. Jonathan, thank you for joining us. The disturbing report putting flesh on what we obviously sense and some hard numbers. Maybe some break us down, go into those a little bit, because, for example, just one example, where those incidents are taking place is one of the most disturbing aspects of the increase, not just the number.
Yeah, I mean, the numbers are disturbing. The location is disturbing. The intensity is absolutely appalling. So the data, as was reflected in the kind of the lead-in, 8,873, 140% increase over the prior year, which was the previous high. And keep in mind that that number that we saw in 2023 was almost 875% greater than a decade ago. So we are talking about not like some wave. We're talking about a tsunami, again, that has no parallel in the 45 years that we've been tracking this information. So yes, you saw these incidents happen. There was a concentration in communities with high numbers of Jewish people. There's a relationship, a correlation between Jewish population and anti-Semitic incidents. But I think what's maybe more salient to talk about today is it's happening on college campuses, it's happening at public places, it's happening in private workspaces, it's happening everywhere. And look at these images. I mean, when people think that waving a Hezbollah flag makes you a freedom fighter, it doesn't. It makes you a complete idiot, because Hezbollah is a foreign terror organization. And if you think that somehow targeting Jewish businesses, you know, we saw hundreds and hundreds, more than 400 Jewish businesses targeted and victimized last year. That has nothing to do with the liberation of Palestine. That only is about intimidating, harassing, and victimizing American Jews, and it's wrong, plain and simple.
Well, let's talk about, again, because the report does note since October 7th, I would say the nexus between when criticism of Israel becomes demonization of Israel and it becomes the ultimate evil, that seems to justify any action that can bleed over into anti-Semitic activity. So defining anti-Semitism, especially in context of Israel, and then how to combat it.
Look, where I would only slightly disagree with the reporter's lead-in, anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, plain and simple. And I don't need Congresswoman Tlaib to lecture me on Jewish vulnerability. Thank you, no thank you. Here's the reality, right? If you're saying from the river to the sea in front of a synagogue, if you are chanting Free Gaza at people walking to shul on a Saturday morning, if you are screaming about decolonization to, again, a Hillel student going to a Havdalah service, you are not a freedom fighter. You are not some kind of social activist. You are an anti-Semite and a bigot, plain and simple. Now, it isn't new for events in the Middle East to trigger spasms of violence here. But let's not blame it all on Israel. Let's not blame the victim. In 2022, which was the previous high point, the state of Israel, as you know better than I, had a coalition government that included Arabs and Jews, Muslims and non-Jews. I mean, the truth is that anti-Semitism thrives in an environment where conspiracy theories run amok. And it literally feeds off of the kind of hate that, non-state actors like Hezbollah and Hamas and rogue states like Iran promote and propagandize with relentless efficiency.
Right. So I guess then the report then brings us to the question of what should be done, and how can the American Jewish community, which itself is divided on some issues, can come together and be effective counterweight in order to deal with this trend, which frankly we could see is sort of shaking maybe the foundation of the American Jewish community.
Well, I'm so glad you said that. So a couple points. Number one, I will tell you, in my 8+ years running ADL, I've never seen the American Jewish community so united. There may be differences of opinion about Bibi Netanyahu. There may be differences of opinion about Joe Biden. There may be differences of opinion about Donald Trump. But American Jews, from the most observant to the most secular, from those on the right to those on the left, old and young, are all in agreement that this environment of anti-Semitism is completely intolerable, and that they stand behind the state of Israel. So what should be done about it? Number one, we want, as the president has done, governors to launch state strategies to tackle anti-Semitism. Ron DeSantis has done it in Florida. More should do it. That's number one. Number two, we want our allies to show up once and for all and to stand with us. And then number three, I got to say, I need every American Jew and non-Jew to be activated, because here's the deal at the end of the day. Anti-Semitism is not just a Jewish problem. It's an American problem. It is a symptom of a sickness in a society. And if you don't address anti-Semitism, the hate underneath it will overtake everything. So Jewish or non-Jewish, all Americans need to step up, need to get in the game, and need to fight back against this hate once and for all.
Right. Anti-Semitism, to use the metaphor, is usually the canary in the mine shaft, a symptom of a much bigger problem in a society. Jonathan Greenblatt from ADL, thank you for joining us on I-24 News. And Yaki, of course, the state of Israel, the government and the people of Israel have to be a part of that fight as well. What could they or should they contribute?
Exactly. This is a very important point, Caleb, because we are used to the Jews in the United States are helping the state of Israel. Now the reverse of roles, because the state of Israel has to defend those Jews, have to work with the United States, with the governors, with so many in the United States and in Europe. I mean, we haven't discussed Europe, but the anti-Semitism in Europe is on the high as well. So this is a universal problem. This is a growing problem, and we have to face anti-Semitism, and Israel has to play, and the government of Israel has to play a significant role there as well, fighting this anti-Semitism.
Yes, but yes.
I think it's very disturbing to see the campus of Columbia University, where I spent so many years with those campaigns, anti-Semitic campaigns. But I think in the end, a victorious Israel, an Israel that conducts its business well and succeed in this conflict, might have the effect that can combat this kind of anti-Semitism.
I wouldn't count on that, Doron. I mean, anti-Semitism is latent till it comes out.
I'm not talking historically on the long-standing times of history, but when Israel is strong, when Israel has succeeded to create a cool coalition with its partners, Europe, the US, then our standing is better. So we also have to be very effective in terms of this conflict and conclude it victoriously and in a right conduct, and then I would hope it also would affect this phenomenon.
But at the same time, we have to fight anti-Semitism. I mean, we shouldn't wait to the results, because, connecting it to what is happening in Israel, there are so many anti-Semites now in the United States that want to see the disappearance of the state of Israel. When they chant from the river to the sea, this is the call for the.
I would just add one thing, which is I agree with you. I don't think what happens with Israel is going to impact on what anti-Semites think. But an Israel that's strong, that's confident, that's united, would inspire certainly Jews abroad, would give confidence to the American Jewish community, to the communities in Europe, South America, elsewhere, to be able to more effectively stand up perhaps against anti-Semitism.
And especially when there are huge communities like in the United States, where there are small communities, they are so afraid, then Israel has to step up and work and help them. But big communities like in the United States, they have to be extremely strong and fight this phenomenon as well.
Well, hopefully that will be the case. Yaki, Diane, Doron, Avital, thank you for joining us on this broadcast. We're going to continue on and go back to what happened on Saturday, the early hours of Sunday morning, when Iran launched 300 suicide drones, cruise missiles towards Israel. Now, the IDF deployed its aerial defense systems and pilots to down these missiles and drones. Now, a combat navigator of the Israeli Air Force recounts his experiences of the night in this report that we've adapted from Channel 12 News.
It was a huge operation. It's in these moments that you know why you get involved. This is what we trained so hard for.
The night between Saturday to Sunday was one of the most dramatic nights Israel experienced, crowned with the unprecedented success with all of Israel's technological means.
There was really a lot of tension in the air. We wondered what we expected of ourselves, our skills. We were impatient to be seated in the cockpit. You also think a lot about your family, best friends, who you want to protect.
During the night, from Saturday to Sunday, Iran fired more than 300 missiles, suicide drones, and ballistic missiles towards Israel. Israel destroyed almost all of them and declared a 99% success rate. IDF pilots and air defense have trained for years for such a scenario.
Since then, the tension's been increasing, and last Saturday evening, we understood that the Iranian attack was imminent. This Saturday, things became clearer. We were called to join our squadrons. At 7:30 p.m., everyone was there, ready to carry out their mission. The feelings varied between emotion and a rather strange impression, as with every new situation you're going to be confronted with.
On Saturday, we received confirmation of the operation and began arming the planes with appropriate ammunition, and technicians had to work extremely quickly to equip the planes with air-to-air missiles capable of destroying the engaged targets. Reservists were mobilized, including crews arriving from all corners of the country. Thanks to very precise intelligence information, we were able to achieve an unprecedented result with our pilots. Then, as soon as the missiles arrived in the area, we were able to destroy almost all of them.
Pilots climb into their cockpits and take off for an air battle reminiscent of other, older wars.
When you take off, you know your mission. You become one with your aircraft. You have the controls in hand, and as soon as you arrive in the area, you must trust yourself. It's for this particular moment that we're prepared.
They take off, and the eyes of an entire nation are fixed on them.
As soon as we knew the missiles had been fired, a formation of 4 planes takes off, and they start taking down the targets. We arrive in an already engaged sector with many targets to destroy. You have to locate your target with certainty. Don't confuse it with a light civilian aircraft or something else that could mislead you. What you see in front of you is the road to your house, and you have no other choice to destroy the target so it does not reach your house.
What do you see with the naked eye from your cockpit?
First of all, many screens. In any case, it's already dark and it's a desert area. It's not very well lit. The first thing you really see at night is the release of your missiles. It's a trace in the sky, and 2 or 3 seconds later, the explosion when you hit your target. You tell yourself that everything is fine, and you move on to the next target. We are at war. I think of my brothers, of my friends who are fighting, including one of my best friends who died in combat 3 months ago. I think of him, of my own family, and it reminds me of what I do.
Lieutenant G, 27 years old, has taken part in numerous attacks in southern Lebanon, as well as on the Gaza front in recent months, but this time the mission is very different.
The first difficulty is to recognize your target. Then, once the target is locked, I give authorization to the pilot to shoot it down. 2 or 3 seconds later, there's a big explosion in front of your eyes, and the target crashes to the ground. Then you work on hitting the targets one after another. This usually happens at high altitude.
As soon as this historic night ends, we return to normality, although for Lieutenant G, it's not totally over. When you get off the plane, what is the first thing you do? Do you talk to your parents?
The first message was from my partner, that the night went well, that I love her, we'll see each other in the morning.
Are you preparing for what's next?
Of course, all the time. We never know what's coming, and we force ourselves to be ready for all possible scenarios. We look forward, and we don't get stuck in a situation, even if it's extreme. Without forgetting, it could be repeated tomorrow, and we'll have to be very concentrated and precise to succeed once again, protecting civilians and preventing any incursion of flying objects that could harm our homes.
Oh, that's a hero there. Now, despite the conflict here over the past 6 months, which we've been covering in depth, you might be surprised to know that real estate prices in Israel have remained strong, especially here in Tel Aviv. Our Emily Francis has more on why that is in this report.
The Tel Aviv skyline is rising into the future with no signs of slowing down. After all, Tel Aviv has been ranked the world's happiest city. Real estate lawyer Andy Schwartz affirms that the real estate market is back to where it was before October 7th and will only get stronger and more secure.
First of all, the prices are quite rigid, meaning that if you want to play safe, like you're buying gold, Israel is very secure, meaning the prices doesn't drop, okay? People who are buying properties in Israel are thinking for the future generation. And it's look like a risk allotment and risk and distribution of assets.
בנדל"ן זה שלושה דברים, לוקיישן, לוקיישן, לוקיישן. פה יש לך את כל מה שאתה צריך בשביל לחיות ברמה הכי גבוהה שיש.
For over 50 years, 3 generations of the Ben Shalom family have put their heart and soul into their real estate projects, including restoring some of Tel Aviv's most famous historic buildings.
זה בעצם בניין באוהאוס, שבעצם בנו אותו במקור לפני כמעט 100 שנה. הוא נמצא בלב תל אביב, קרוב להיכל התרבות, ולשמר כזה בניין, המשמעות שאתה צריך להשתמש בכל החומרים שהשתמשו פעם, אבל בסוף כשאתה מסתכל על התוצאה, זה שווה כל מחיר. הבניין בדיזינגוף 10, זה בניין בעצם של משפחה צרפתית, בניין ישן, בניין לשימור, בניין שהיה רעוע ומתפורר בלוקיישן שהוא הכי טוב שיש, הפך להיות פנינה בלב העיר.
Tel Aviv is a lot like New York, where we don't have any kind of land to build new properties. So we really need to take something down and build something up, just like in New York. So you'll see the value of old, historical, meaningful buildings that they represent so much. And those are being restored and being now renovated. And that's where our specialty is coming to play.
Next up is a passion project along Tel Aviv's famous Park Hayarkon in the upscale Bavli neighborhood, ideal for families.
כשלקוח מגיע אלינו והוא מחליט לקנות דירה בבן שלום, הוא בעצם אנחנו מבינים שהוא שם את הדבר הכי יקר עבורו בחיים, את הבית שלו, אצלנו בידיים.
And for Sarah Geist, the proof is in the pudding.
Honestly, we're now most of the way through this project, and everything they've said they were going to do, they've actually done, which is quite amazing. So, I mean, like really without fail. Everything has been tick, tick, tick.
In Tel Aviv, Emily Francis, I-24 News.
And just an update on some of the issues we discussed earlier. U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says she fully expects that the U.S. will take additional sanctions against Iran in the coming days, including AI options to disrupt terrorist